All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Graham Stewart, and I'll be moderating this town hall this afternoon. And I want to welcome everyone who's joining us either here in the Zoom webinar Q&A or on YouTube as well. So welcome. I just want to have go over a few housekeeping items before we get into it. So many of you submitted questions in advance. Thank you for that. And we'll be kind of interspersing those questions throughout the session with the questions that we receive, live. In some cases, there's been a lot of overlap with questions. People are understandably curious about similar sorts of things. So where possible, we'll be kind of bundling those up. And trying to kind of address multiple questions with one response. We'll also be taking questions live, and there's a few different ways that's going to happen. One is you can use the Q&A function. So you'll see there's a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen if you've joined us on Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube, or if you prefer to use email, you can use the email address conversations@yorku.ca. That's conversations@yorku.ca. And as we go along here, folks who are submitting questions in the Q&A, some of you may be asked to ask a question live. So our moderating staff is kind of going through and picking some of those out. You'll be notified. Your microphone will be turned on, and you'll have that opportunity to ask your question live to the panelists this afternoon. So keep an eye out for that. So obviously, we've got a good 90 minutes here, which is a lot of time to talk, but we likely won't be able to get through all of the questions that have been submitted or will be submitted during the course of the program. But our commitment, as always, is that if you submit a question in writing during the session, either through email, through Zoom, or if you pre-submit it through a mock form, we will get an answer to you coming out of the session if you did not receive one live. So that will be forthcoming. Reminder to everyone that at the end of this town hall, you'll be asked to ask or respond to a poll question. That survey is important to us so we can continue to refine and improve this experience. So please take the time to answer that. With all of that, I'd like to hand it over to President Linton to get us started.
Thank you very much, Graham. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour, bonjour. I really want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I do want to start with the land acknowledgement. We appreciate that this town hall is virtual and we are not all gathered in the same space. And I recognize, therefore, that this land acknowledgement might not be the territory that you are currently on. And I ask that if that is the case, that you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are on and the current treaty holders. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of the university. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tekaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I'm just going to take a moment before giving a few preliminary remarks to ask each of the panelists if they could please introduce themselves. So if they would just take a moment to come on screen. After a few preliminary remarks from me, we'll all be available to answer any questions that you may have, and perhaps I'll ask the Provost to introduce herself first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Phillips. I'm the Provost and Vice President Academic.
Amir?
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be with you today.
Carol?
Hi, Carol McCauley, Vice President, Finance and Administration.
And Lucy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lucy Fromowitz. I'm the Vice-Provost student, so a special welcome to current students, future students, and their parents.
Okay, so thank you so much. And just let me say a few opening remarks. So as many of you know, last Friday, Toronto joined the rest of the province in moving to stage 3 of the Government of Ontario's pandemic reopening plan. It's essential to recognize that while this means that restrictions will loosen, the pandemic is an ongoing challenge, and it is expected to be with us for some time. Importantly, though, stage 3 does allow for the gradual reopening of spaces under certain conditions. So for York, this means that we need to look at each of those conditions and how we can best implement those conditions in terms of our own gradual reopening. For example, a maximum of 50 people at an indoor gathering. What does that mean for university campuses that have multiple buildings? No more than 100 outdoors while maintaining the 2-meter physical distancing guideline, compulsory masks. And so there are many particular conditions that we have to work through in figuring out how we can ensure that we're meeting those guidelines as part of our own gradual plans to reopen. We do understand that the entire community is eager to have all the details, but I would characterize this time in shifting in the city to stage 3 as a major transition period. And because of that major transition, there are many details that have to be worked out. Just even thinking about how we are going to do a deep clean of all of our buildings and how we can control access so that we actually know how many people are on campus at any one time. We are continuing to work closely with government on the interpretation of the public health guidelines for higher education, and we will be regularly updating the community. But let me share with you what we do know so far. I think most of us are aware that the fall term is going to be delivered primarily through online and remote formats. Only a select number of courses have been approved for in-person activities in the fall term. And therefore, we also anticipate that most of our employees will continue to work remotely during this upcoming fall semester. Immediate priorities have always included those required services in order to make sure that we can fulfill the core teaching and research activities of the university. So we've been already responding to requests for increased access to labs, and we're also, of course, looking at how best to accommodate requests for access to offices that are required for colleagues who need to access their offices in order to actually undertake their teaching or research activities. Plans are underway to facilitate these requests, including the requirements for deep cleaning before reopening new spaces, having adequate signage, hand sanitizers, and ensuring that all the systems are in place so that we stay within those prescribed limits on how people can get together and how many. Beyond the immediate needs, we are also starting to look at the requests that have come in order to develop a further set of priorities that have been made as part of the gradual reopening. So requests, for example, for student study spaces, for accommodations. And the goal is to slowly broaden access as it is safe to do so. The wearing of non-medical mouth and nose coverings continues to be mandatory at York if we are not able to maintain the 2-meter physical distancing requirement. To ensure maximum physical distancing, it's also the case that classrooms, shared offices, library facilities, teaching labs, and other academic and non-academic spaces are being reorganized. In high traffic areas where maintaining physical distancing is not going to be feasible, additional protective measures have to be put in place, such as plexiglass barriers, as an example. Community members who are currently on campus include those living in residences, pre-approved in-person teaching and learning for the fall term pre-approved on-site research either this summer or into the fall, pre-scheduled appointments with service and support providers, visiting libraries for curbside pickup, faculty and staff providing designated on-campus services. We know that many of you have questions already as well about the status of the winter term, and those plans are heavily underway already. Discussions are ongoing with public health authorities and with various levels of government. As always, we want to provide as much clarity and early notice as possible to students, faculty, instructors, staff by communicating with you as those plans evolve. You can always find the resources, services, and the latest updates at yorku.ca/bettertogether. A little bit about staff and faculty. I want to comment briefly on a series of measures that we announced last week to help support the well-being of all of us. You will have received an email and a communication that can also be found at the same website, yorku.ca/bettertogether. The measures include keeping meetings to 50-minute increments or less wherever possible, avoiding sending non-urgent emails after 7 p.m., keeping the lunch hour meeting free, and making sure that we schedule time, focus time, for the completion of work tasks in your calendar each week. We know that it won't be easy to undertake all of these measures, but we do believe it's incredibly important as we move forward and help everyone harmonizing their work and their personal life situation. Whether you are a student, a staff, or a faculty member, we recognize that the pandemic may continue to be creating challenges for you. So I want to encourage you all to use the resources and services that we have available. If necessary, please visit yorku.ca/mental health for more information. So thank you very much, and I look forward, along with my colleagues, to answering your questions.
All right, thank you very much, President Linton. So we'll just launch into it here in a couple of seconds. Just a reminder to everyone that there are a few different ways to submit questions. If you've joined us late, you can use the Q&A function in Zoom. You can use the email address, which should be displayed on my screen right now, conversations@yorku.ca. And again, some folks have already used the mock form to submit a question, but a reminder that mock form is now inactive. So if you would like to submit during the session, it is the Q&A or email. Those are your best ways of doing so. So just to launch off, there were quite a few questions submitted in advance, which have to do with, planning for the winter term. And President Linton, you did address this in your opening remarks, but I wonder if we can maybe provide a bit more detail to the attendees here today about sort of what the planning process and how we'll be sort of notifying the community about decisions as we go along.
Sorry, Graham, I was trying to follow an instruction to lower my camera, and so I missed the first part of that. So more information about questions pertaining to in general or winter?
Winter specifically. So,
Okay.
How that planning process will kind of unfold and when the community can expect to get, sort of updates on what winter will look like.
Okay. So I'm going to ask any of my colleagues to feel free to add to what I might just start off by saying, but I'll let you know that we are already discussing winter because we do know the urgency of people needing to make their plans. We've been of the view, and based on conversations with public health, estimates around the likelihood of a vaccine, the potential risks for further outbursts of COVID-19 cases in the fall. And I really come to the conclusion, along with many other educational institutions, that it will be very unlikely that we would have anything close to normal in the winter, that it's likely going to have to be a similar continuation of the fall with a large number of courses being offered online, the majority of our courses. But again, we don't want to get out there too early and start making firm decisions before we have as much information as we can accumulate. I would say that what I can offer you right now is that we have gone and raised with Senate Executive whether or not we will need some type of an extension of the fall provisions with the expectation of offering a fairly large number of our courses online, but with the goal to continue to try to increase access to the campus in line with the stage 3 requirements and in working with public health. And so there will for sure be a certain number of select courses that would need to be offered online for winter. We would have to look at those requests and to determine the number that would need to be offered. Some faculties might have deferred courses from fall to winter. So it's possible that we would need to have some additional courses, number of courses that would be offered in the winter. There may be more courses that could offer optional in-person activities, because obviously we appreciate that as much as students come with the focus on their degree programming and their learning, that happens in many different ways. You know, they want to network with one another, network with potential employers, outside members, extracurricular activities. And so we will be, as other universities, developing a plan over the next couple of weeks that will help clarify what winter is most likely to look like, at least so far as the delivery of the courses. If it turns out as we move on that it's possible to increase the numbers of optional in-person activities on our campuses or extracurricular activities, opening up the gyms. I mean, obviously all of these priorities that we know are important to our students, we would continue to look to, but we do expect to be able to confirm the arrangements around how courses will be delivered in the next couple of weeks, I would say in the next few weeks. Maybe the provost would like to add something to that.
Sure, I will be happy to. And just to emphasize, we are working on this very actively right now, and I hope that actually by probably next week, we'll at least have some more information to share. And we're very aware that people have a range of different needs, and that there are some students and faculty, for instance, who would find it very important that they be able to teach and learn remotely into the winter. And there would be others who would be keen to have whatever access to in-person learning activities they could have. So we really are doing our best to accommodate that full spectrum and recognize there's a variety of needs. I would say we have a question from Stephanie as well in the chat about staff, and the same would apply to staff. I think that we are not going to be fully clear of the pandemic in the winter. That seems to be what the best indications are. And so it is going to be necessary for there to be some ability for some staff to continue working at home. And so at the same time, we will have some required staff on campus. So there will be a mix of things happening. I want to remind faculty members that the way we organized the fall was to start with a poll of instructors. Anyone who was assigned to be teaching in the fall term filled out a form if they felt that they could not fulfill the learning outcomes in their course without some in-person access to facilities on campus, or if they had an optional in-person learning activity they would like to propose. Those forms were then all submitted into the dean's offices. We went through a prioritization exercise, and we were able to accommodate about 70 courses that are being, now the spaces are all being prepared to be taught on campus in the fall, at least in part. We would anticipate that, subject to our ongoing consultation with Senate Executive, that a similar process would occur for the winter term, and that we would want to get that rolling, in the next 3 weeks, so that we can start to get people's views about how they would prefer to teach their winter course and where we absolutely require access to physical facilities. So I'll stop there, and please stay tuned for more information. We realize that people are looking for information at this point.
All right, thank you very much. So turning over to research and some of the activities that have returned to campus, a few individuals have asked, when and how they'll be able to access their labs again. But perhaps I'll read a question here that's sort of emblematic of it. Why are some research labs, such as mine, still closed when most of my colleagues have been given permission to restart their research? No information has been given about how these decisions are made and who is making these decisions. And it goes on to sort of question whether, what arrangements are for transparency around that. So as part of the answer, I think it would be good to, address the process in general and how folks can go about requesting access to their labs.
Okay.
Anita?
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda. Thank you for that question. The on-campus research activities are being resumed in a very cautious and phased manner on the basis of the Ramping Up Research Framework, which is available on the university website to the entire York community. The process and the basis on which decisions are being made are outlined in this framework. Very briefly, the process involves a communication from Associate Dean Research that goes to all researchers within their faculty or school to submit their requests. The Associate Deans then rank these requests based on the already announced criteria within the Ramping Up Research Framework. These ranked requests are forwarded to Research Continuity Group. The Research Continuity Group then coordinates with York Services to open these facilities. So far, the Research Continuity Group has honored all approvals made by the faculties unless there is any missing information. Please note that because of the COVID-19 situation, the access to campus is limited, very limited in phase 1 of Ramping Up Research. Only 46 faculty members from across the university returned to campus for research during phase 1. The total number of researchers that actually returned to campus in phase 1, including graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, and supporting technical administrative staff members, was 245. Going forward in phase 2 of Ramping Up Research, the faculty schools have received requests from about 100 researchers for a total of 371 graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, and staff researchers asking to resume their on-campus research activities. We are very hopeful that we'll be able to make preparation to approve an overwhelmingly large majority and possibly all of these requests. We are planning to have these researchers return to campus during the 3rd and 4th week of August. Fingers crossed. If any of the researchers have not submitted their request and would like to do so, please forward your request to Associate in Research and copy me. We will try to accommodate late requests to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Graham, could I just add that, whether or not the requests pertain to teaching or research or some other request, we are trying very hard to put up the criteria on our website so that people know that obviously research and teaching needs for student study spaces, the library, access, curbside. These are the priorities. Obviously, we want to ensure that we're able to deliver on the core mission of the universities. We do need to have the application and the review process because we have to manage the numbers. We have to know who's coming, what building they need access to. So all of these requests, when they come in, they then go to facilities and safety so that we can ensure that we can deliver on the buildings having a deep clean, just even thinking about how washrooms are going to be used, how people might need access to food. If we open up research and there's labs and there's machinery or other facilities that need service, there's all of these details that we have to work out. We are doing our absolute best to try to accommodate as many requests as possible. We're obviously as interested as all of you in supporting our colleagues and making our lives easier in how we can deliver on our core activities. There's one question in the chat that I want to make sure we don't forget about as well, because I really understand the concern there. Staff want to know, I think can't quite make out without my glasses, who's asked that question, my apologies. But we've got a question, how far in advance will staff be given notice? And we fully appreciate that there are many of us who are balancing children at home, for example, or other family care needs. Where in all instances, if there is the need for required staff, and of course, as we increase research activities, as we increase more people on campus who want access to their offices, this has implications as well, of course, for staff. We're hoping that managers would have the plan, the expectation is that managers would have a conversation with staff, because there may be opportunities for certain staff who really want or quite eager to come back onto campus versus some staff who have family accommodation challenges, for example. And so we're hoping to work in a very collegial way on trying to balance how we bring staff back onto campus. But of course, if there were staff who had certain limitations and needed a bit more notice, we would of course be accommodating those challenges.
All right, thank you very much. And it's a good opportunity to remind folks, I know a few people have submitted questions into the chat window, and this is a bit confusing in Zoom. So there's a chat window, and then there is a Q&A option at the bottom. So we would ask people wherever possible to submit those questions into the Q&A and not into the chat, because it's a little easier for us to keep track of the incoming there. So just to turn to international students here, there's been quite a few questions that kind of revolve around the same number of issues. And I guess that would be, what is the quarantine plan for students who are arriving on campus, who are required to quarantine if they're coming in from outside of Canada? And what sort of support is going to be provided to those students, either pre-departure or on arrival? So pre-departure would be things like letters of support, if that's required, port of entry letters, and then what can they expect when they actually arrive on campus?
Lucy, I'm wondering if I can get you to start with that response.
I'd love to, thank you. We have an extensive quarantine plan, and we have begun the communications to all international students, our undergrads and our graduate students, about this. So the answer is yes, we will be providing special letters. We are sharing with students how to request those letters. We also have a comprehensive quarantine plan that involves facilities, hotel spaces that we have rented off campus, because all of our international students arriving will quarantine off campus. Within those spaces in the hotels, we have ensured that we have single rooms, but we also have suites for any families who are joining us within the hotel. There's a 24-hour shuttle, so that as our students arrive at the airport, they will be able to contact the hotel for immediate pickup. We've arranged for food, linen, and a variety of needs as well. There'll be a welcome pack when they get there. In addition, there will be wellness supports, and that is daily. Our staff will be touching base with all of our students who are living within these spaces, the quarantine spaces at the hotel, to make sure that they're accessing online services, familiar with what's available to them while they're in quarantine. And then finally, we will also be having regular health checks with our staff, contacting each of the individual students, just so that they're able to take their temperature, share any concerns, and we can tend to their needs as well. So there's quite a comprehensive plan. And if any students have any questions about this, if you could please contact York International, and they'll make sure that they respond immediately.
All right, thank you very much. So we have a question from a faculty member, which is, what will be the mechanism for students attending on-campus labs to report possible COVID-19 symptoms or a positive test for COVID-19? They've taken part in the COVID training module for employees, and it discusses how on-campus employees are to report such issues, but does not discuss how on-campus students are to do so.
I think I have to flip that to either Carol or Lucy.
I'm glad to address the student issue. So in all cases, the first point of contact for any individual who believes that they're symptomatic or have concerns is the public health number. Public health will then work closely with the individual student to guide them towards the appropriate testing and work with them to understand who they've come in contact with. Public health, when it's a limited number of students that, or a limited number of others that they have come in contact with, whether it's on or off campus, will contact all of those people. However, if this student believes they come in contact with a wide variety of people as they describe their movements across campus, then public health will be in touch with the university, and we will provide information not specific about the name or identify any individual, but the time and place, and direct anyone who has concerns to contact public health.
All right, thank you. And related to that, we have a question from a staff member. Will the university be advocating that staff, faculty, and students download the COVID Alert app, which has been put out by the federal government, to allow for better contact tracing in case of a breakout?
Well, personally, I actually think that would be a very smart thing for us to do. I think as individual citizens, it's in all of our best interests to work together collaboratively to try to minimize the risk of any individuals getting COVID-19. And we've seen the disastrous effects elsewhere. And Canada is performing relatively well, and we want to keep up that good effort. I'm certainly happy to take back that recommendation to our emergency operations group and discuss making that recommendation if we haven't done so already. Does that make sense, Carol?
Yes, I agree. I think that would make sense. I think the app was I just saw it on my email today, so I think it is quite new.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion. Graham, I know that you're the moderator, but I'm going to take a little bit of license here because I've been tracking some of the questions, and I wanted to see if I could give the provost an opportunity to see whether or not she might be able to answer some of the questions that have to do with specific academic matters. So there are questions around whether or not the fall and maybe the winter exams will be online. There's a question about whether or not the nursing placements are going to be suspended for this year, which I'm quite sure they will not be, but and how they're going to be done in the time being. So I'm wondering if the provost could either answer those questions now or let us know how we could get the answers to those questions.
Yes, I can provide some information, certainly. For placements, we're of course dependent on our clinical partners to make their own decisions first as to when they're ready to welcome students back into the workplace. And I suspect that they are eager to have the students there. However, they may not be confident yet that they can keep the students safe. And so we really are in touch with those placement hosts, and not just in nursing, but in all programs that have placements and practica that require going into physical locations off campus. It really is about the partner's readiness to have those students there. So that will vary from sector to sector. As you know, for instance, the public schools are really just working out their plans as to the number of people that will be in different spaces and how they will accommodate that. So I think that many institutions, many organizations are in the same situation we are, of really trying to work out exactly how many people they can accommodate and what has to have priority. But we certainly are maintaining contact with them and letting them know that, our students are looking for information about when placements will again become possible, especially since in many cases they are required as part of your program completion. So in terms of, there was another question, I'm sorry.
Just before we leave the nursing placement issue, I'm wondering, to the extent possible, will we be trying to have our nursing students, while we wait to negotiate with our partners about their readiness, to try to put in some of their hours, their practicum hours with our clinical lab? Will that be possible?
I know that we actually do have a little bit of that starting already this month. People, nursing students coming into the simulation suite to be able to practice some of the required competencies that they need to have. The extent to which we will be able to expand that in the fall, I think, is still to be determined. I'm so sorry, there was another question about winter exams.
Online exams, yeah.
Right. So for fall, we know that only 70 courses, 70 out of well over 3,000 courses, have been given accommodation to have some presence on campus. And so that may not even include any final evaluation. So really we are trying to, for the fall, we're trying to limit on-campus activities to those that are required in order to meet learning outcomes. So for a typical exam, that is a written exam, it's unlikely in the fall that we would be having in-person exams. I think the winter is a bit harder to assess at this point. However, if we know that many courses will need to be remote to accommodate students who can't come on campus or won't be in Toronto, it's not that difficult then to deduce that the exams will also have to be remote. So again, the congregation limits in terms of 50 people in a room at once mean that in-person exams are very difficult to administer still. So until those restrictions change significantly, I would expect that exams typically will be online. And in particular, if students are needing to access the course remotely, they'd also need to be able to do their assessment remotely. So I think we will see quite a lot of online evaluation, remote evaluation for the fall, certainly, likely for the winter, but I would say the winter is still a little bit hard to predict what kinds of changes we might see.
Okay, thank you very much. So I noticed we have quite a few York staff members who've joined us this afternoon, and also quite a few questions from York staff members regarding sort of the work from home versus working on campus requirements. And this was addressed briefly in the opening remarks, but I wonder if the panel and President Lenton can provide a sort of a very specific answer about what the expectation is for staff who are in that non-required category. Looking at September and through the fall term, what the expectations for those staff members will be.
So we made a commitment that for the fall, while the majority of courses are being offered online, that is in the best interests of all of us to try to have as many of our staff who can work from home do work from home. So that's the basic starting point. For winter, again, it will likely be the case that as we gradually increase access to campus, that there may be the actual requirements for staff might increase somewhat, but we would still be balancing how many and dealing with the parameters around how many people we could have on campus. And so in all likelihood, although there might be some additional requirements for staff to be on campus, there will still be a great deal of our staff who will likely be working from home. Because in the past, prior to COVID-19, we didn't have a work from home policy. And so I think that for many institutions, COVID-19 has raised really important questions about how do you support people who need to work from home. What are the actual requirements for staff on campus? It's raised a lot of really important questions, and we're taking this opportunity to really ask some of those questions that then can provide a really good framework for fall and winter. But by far the majority of staff, at least for fall, will be working from home, a good number in winter. We understand that we would need to give any individual staff notice, but we would also need to talk with individual staff as we identified specific needs to have certain staff on campus, either full-time or part-time. So there won't be any announcement that will just come out that next week we're all back on campus, on our campuses. That's not the way we're going to be proceeding. It will be in consultation, it'll be gradual, and we will be, in all cases, trying to, in fact, minimize the numbers that are actually coming onto campus, because as I indicated to you, stage 3 has quite a few parameters on how many total individuals you can actually have even outside in a common congregation. Do any of my colleagues want to add to what I just said? I hope that's helpful.
That's great. And related to that, we've had a staff member ask that I've been paying more out of my own pocket since having to work from home, including hydro, internet, and work supplies. It looks like this situation will be continuing. So will York be issuing us a T2200?
I'm not sure that I can answer that question well. Can Carol?
Sure. There's quite a bit of activity sort of out in the general population about this question right now. I know that the Association of Certified Professional Accountants has posed some questions to the CRA about T2200s. So currently the rules are that if you're required to work from home 50% or more, and then you're able to deduct expenses related to a home office. And so one of the questions that's been put to CRA, which has not yet been answered, is will there be a 50% rule just for the COVID period? So we're waiting for an answer on that, not just as us as an institution, but the general population. So that's a possibility. Another would be that that actually by the end of August we will have been 5 months. So the 50% of 6 months isn't too far along. If we are if our employees need a T2200 to be able to claim home office expenses, then we will issue them. There is also a request to government that because the administrative burden could be greatly increased, particularly for smaller organizations, by having to issue a number of T2200s, could this be a year that they're not required and that people simply self-identify that they've had to work? And so that's another question that's outstanding with CRA right now. I do want to say though, regardless, keep your receipts, whether it be for home-related expenses, or specifically for if you've outlaid any funds that have not been reimbursed for things like office supplies in your home. Regardless of a T2200, those will be deductible. Any expenses that you incur for the purpose of earning income are deductible expenses. This T2200 specifically relates to deduction related to use of a home office. So my advice is keep your receipts, be clear about where the space is in your home that you're using as a home office so that you are ready to make that filing on your tax return when if it's available for 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've also received quite a few questions regarding sort of individual access to space, and these kind of fall into two categories. One would be faculty members asking if and how they can access their offices, either to retrieve items or to actually do work in those spaces. And then another group of questions from students asking if it would be possible to access quiet study spaces on campus. For example, if they aren't able to study at home, they have a crowded environment, whatever it is. If there will be some provision for them to come on campus and study.
Maybe I'll just flip that over to the provost, if that's okay.
Sure, I'm happy to start and then others can add. I believe that in the chat, one of our team members here at the very start of the chat circulated the link to the forms that you can fill out to request access to buildings. We still do need people to request centrally. If they wish to visit their office to pick up materials, or if they feel that they need access to a particular space in order to carry out their work, their teaching, their research, their administrative work. And the reason for that is so that we can actually track all of the activity on campus to make sure that we're complying with the public health guidelines. So there is a form there, and it is submitted centrally and then goes into your particular associate dean or manager so that they can assess the priority that's attached to that in terms of the requirement that you be able to access those spaces, whether there's a family accommodation need that might need to be considered. For instance, if people are not able to work at home because they have caregiving responsibilities that aren't really consistent with the kind of work that they need to get done, that will be taken into account. The need to pick up materials from your office, the need to access certain kinds of research facilities, technology, etc. This is all something that will be considered. And so far, we've been able to accommodate pretty much all the requests. It may take a bit of time. We may need security to help give you access to a building. We may need to make sure there is not too many people in one space at one time, that there's appropriate signage and cleaning that have been done in the space. So there's a lot of considerations to make sure we can do this in a way that keeps everybody safe, but please use the form, and we will accommodate just as much as we can. We are working towards being able to enhance access to spaces and to get a better systems in place to really track and make sure that we are giving access where we can, but not going over the limits. In terms of the student study spaces, we are very aware that not all students have a great place to study at home, whether it has to do with the strength of the internet service that you've got, whether it has to do with a quiet space where you can close the door and concentrate. These are all things that not everyone has access to at home. And so we are working on a plan very actively to open up certain student spaces for study purposes. Again, we have to make sure that they are adequately distanced in terms of students' proximity to one another, that they're cleaned, that there is a way to keep track of how many people at once. So that planning is very actively underway, and we hope to be able to roll that out in advance of September, just as the new term is starting, so that people will know what's available to them. Lucy, did you want to add something that I might have missed there?
Thank you, Lisa. What I will add is the hierarchy was we had to place these 70 courses, which the provost spoke of first. So we knew where students would be, where there would be numbers of students at any given time. So our next step now is locating the rooms, identifying the IT capabilities of each room, identifying proximity to washrooms, making sure there's signage, proximity to food or coffee, these sorts of things if students are spending any amount of time in that space, posting all the appropriate information. So we're very much, as the provost said, in the process of that work, and we will be communicating to all students by providing the notification of the rooms and the IT capacity within each, because some students might be looking for simply some quiet space that doesn't require the technology in the room, and others might be looking quite specifically for what computers are in the room, what they're loaded with, what information is available to them. So we'll communicate that before the start of term. It'll come out in August.
It's like Amir might have something to add as well.
You're on mute, Amir.
Sorry. I would just like to add that those graduate students who have the PhD or master's defense, on exceptional basis, we are indeed making a conference room, Zoom conference room space available for them. Similarly, if students are doing their master's or thesis proposals or comprehensive exams, which are oral, we are treating those applications on an exceptional basis and making conference room space available to them.
All right, great. So I believe we now have a live question to be asked here from Maria, who is ready to ask her question. So Maria, over to you.
Thank you so much. My question pertains to what supports are currently available or will be available for students who require assistance accessing computing facilities or for borrowing laptops. Some of them may not have access to a laptop for completing their online or remote courses. I know that some of the students I was dealing with in the summer, some of them, their computers broke down. So what can they, have in terms of supports for that?
So we created a laptop loaning program for the summer, precisely because we were aware that some students were facing that difficulty. And we would be expecting to make that available in September as well. And I'm not sure about the details of how the loan program went, but the students did have to come in and pick up the laptop and return it at the end of, when they finished their courses. There can be other complexities around that internationally in terms of whether or not students have access to the bandwidth that they need in order to be able, they might have the technology, their laptop, but not other resources. And so we're looking very carefully about those issues, both domestically and internationally. Internationally, it may be necessary to try to get a dedicated VPN. Domestically, it may be the case that we will be able to provide some access to computer labs, as in not sort of open computer labs, but people who need to book time. But we do have a comprehensive set of options for students who don't have the laptop or other challenges that they might be facing.
All right, thanks very much, and thanks to Maria. Now, we just had a question come in, that sort of a clarification from a previous one from international students, so I want to make sure that we get back to that before we get too far away. And so it's just on this question of quarantining in the hotel space. Will the students or faculty members who are quarantining, will they be expected to carry that cost or not?
Lucy, do you want to?
Will be picking up the cost for the students.
All right, great. So related to cost, there's quite a few students have asked about tuition levels for the upcoming term. And a few people pointed out that they have lost summer income and incurred more expenses as a result of the pandemic. And that they won't have access to a lot of the existing spaces on campus that they're used to accessing. So why has there not been a tuition reduction?
I do want to put a shout out to the federal government for their program of supporting students, because honestly, we know that a very high percentage, over 60% of York students do work part-time to help put themselves through university, and the decline of summer opportunities for employment would have hit our students very, very hard. So we're incredibly appreciative of the support that the federal government has made available to students. At the same time, regarding tuition, I'm sure that everyone remembers that tuition was cut by 10% for 1920. And there'll be also no increase in tuition for this year. Tuition was frozen. So that's a 13%, because on average, to keep up with inflation and costs, tuition goes up usually about 3%. That's a significant decline in tuition revenue that the university has been trying to deal with last year and this year, totaling over $60 million for us. We did look really carefully at everything that students pay. When it comes to tuition and meeting the student learning outcomes, I want to say that online delivery is actually not less expensive than in person. The university obviously wanted to ensure that students receive the same high quality education for which York is known. And we therefore invested heavily in our teaching commons, in workshops, developing champions, hiring additional educational developers, instructional designers, in order to ensure that faculty members had the support that they needed to develop online courses and other remote options. You know, we all know that it's not simply a matter of just posting your lecture notes online. You know, doing a high quality learning experience has meant that many faculty members have had to think about, how do you offer virtual experiential education, for example? How do you create opportunities for students to connect with one another? How do you even redo your exams? You know, if you're having to do an exam in an online environment, that sometimes requires a whole different way of thinking about online exams. So the investment in this moving and transitioning to online and other remote means, multi-delivery methods for some faculty, synchronous and asynchronous. So there won't be any savings for the university, and we would certainly have the expectation that the learning experience, and certainly students getting access to the student learning outcomes, the skills, the knowledge that they need, that will be maintained. We did look carefully at the ancillary fees, and we wanted to ensure that we looked at the ancillary fees and what ancillary fees are for general kinds of supports, what are ancillary fees are specific based on limited access, and could we try to make some reductions on those fees? And we did that. I don't know if the Vice-Provost students would like to elaborate on that piece, but we were trying to be very sensitive around what more could we do for our students during this time. Do you want to elaborate a bit on the ancillary fees, Lucy?
Of course. So the majority of our services are all available remote and have transitioned in such a way that they are fully accessible to students regardless of location. Athletics and recreation is the one area where we had to limit services. We couldn't offer the full expanse of services. So we did reduce that fee to 60%. Athletics has been now offering on-campus outdoor opportunities for primarily the students who are finding themselves on campus to have a chance to work out and have recreation activities, stay involved and stay fit. And we've also, in the same way, for our varsity athletes, been able to offer some very limited program in no more than 9 students per group. And of course, the instructor out. We are looking for how we might be able to open Tate McKenzie and offer some on-campus recreation. It would be limited. It would be really by, students would have to make appointments so we know how many people are there. And it would be primarily directed to the students who are already on campus. We wouldn't be encouraging those not on campus because of residence or courses or otherwise to attend just for that purposes. So yes, we are reducing the ancillary fee in that area, but we are also taking the opportunity, because students are not fully on campus, to expand some of the physical opportunities and add improvements to the athletic facilities. So when students do return, there will be an expansion of opportunities available to them.
Thank you, Lucy. Lisa?
Thanks. I just wanted to acknowledge that the situation of international students is quite different than domestic students in terms of their tuition. International students did not benefit from the tuition freeze that the provincial government brought in, which was only for domestic students. At the same time, we know many international students are having the same kinds of financial challenges related to COVID and loss of job opportunities, etc. And so the university did create a special international student bursary, an award that is provided to international students to offset and eliminate any tuition increase, to try to assist them as well. I wanted to also say that I have been incredibly impressed by the way our faculty and our instructors are taking up all the offerings that the university has put on over the summer to help people reconfigure their courses and rethink their teaching in an online and remote environment in terms of what kinds of engagement can be provided for, what kinds of hands-on activities, what kinds of different ways of making sure students can talk to each other and can ask questions. And so it can have access to the materials in a flexible way, depending on what time zone they're in, what their needs are, what else they're juggling in their life, but also can have opportunities for more live discussion. And so I think that what you will see in September is that you have faculty members who in many cases have poured a lot of energy into and gotten quite enthusiastic about how they can make the best use of these online tools, and that you'll find that you're pleasantly, I think, surprised by some of the new things that they're doing that they maybe hadn't even discovered yet in the winter term. So I hope that everyone is going to just wait for their instructors to be in touch with them, because I know that it's a little bit different when you're not showing up to a classroom on the first day, but you can expect to hear from your instructors about how they will start off the course and explain how it's all going to work. You'll be relying heavily on the Moodle site for your courses. And I think that soon you'll be able to start getting engaged with that, and it'll all become a little bit more clear how this is going to work.
Great, thank you. So we've had a couple of questions about the always popular topic of campus parking, and whether it will continue to be free, or if the charge for parking will be reinstated, or how the university plans to approach that going forward.
Carol?
Always a popular question. All I can say is that the decision hasn't been made yet. Our folks in the ancillary services are surveying what other institutions are doing, just as comparators, to find out, to see what other situations are. I'm aware that on other campuses that paid parking has been reinstated, even in the summer. But I'm expecting a recommendation to come from ancillary services in the very near future, and then we'll be taking that through the group of decision makers at the emergency policy group. So stay tuned, but I don't have a clear answer at this point.
All right, thank you very much. And we've had a couple of questions relating to libraries and library services. So right now, the individual asking the question says, currently curbside pickup is only for faculty and graduate students. When will the library open curbside pickup for undergraduate students?
And just a related question on that I noticed in the feed was some students or others are not actually sure about how to return the books. So I'm wondering who of my colleagues has information about the libraries. I'm afraid I don't know the answers to these questions.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to take that one back. I know that libraries are planning for successive stages of reopening, and so I suspect there is a clear answer, and unfortunately I don't have it, so we'll have to follow up on that.
I do want to make a commitment to everyone. I've been following the Q&A and the chat. It's incredibly good questions that people are asking. We don't necessarily have all the answers. I wish we did. We're working on them, but I just want to make a commitment to everyone in case your question is not answered today, that these create a great contribution to the general Q&A, and we will respond to all of the questions, if not right this moment, on our website.
All right, so an anonymous individual asks, with the shift to remote assessment, how is the university planning on committing to and upholding standards of academic integrity?
Okay, I just want to say thank you to Marcia Salmon, who said that there is a new box to drop off library books for returns outside the William Small building. So some of you know the answers better than we do. The question, thank you for that. The question on academic integrity is obviously a really important one. And I just want to say again, all credit to our faculty members who obviously are very seized with ensuring the academic integrity of their courses and are ensuring in all cases that the student learning outcomes of each of the courses will be met, often through very new, creative, virtual ways of providing education. And similarly with, how you think about assessment and from, whether or not that's essays or practical assessment or essays or exams, they're looking very carefully at the way in which you need to do things differently in this environment. We've been doing online to some extent for a very long time, but having the majority of your courses taught online is in fact a major undertaking. But we have these champions, these people who have been doing online, as I've said, for some time, and they're starting to share best practices around, for example, exams, how you have to change exams in such a way that perhaps might more thoughtfully ask people, to problem solve an essay question, for example, on an exam. So, at the end of the day, this is for our academic colleagues, for each and every one of them to look at their own course, what's possible, and to ensure that they are maintaining the academic integrity of the course. And of course, we are supporting those efforts. Even across universities, they're sharing of any challenges of, problem solving. So I would say that the broader community, certainly in Ontario, have also come together to try to support one another in these efforts. Don't know if any of my colleagues want to add to that.
I would just say that it's proven to be a very difficult issue and one that's quite demoralizing, I think, for a lot of students and for faculty. And I know a lot of thought is going into assessment methods and how to, in many cases, lots of efforts to create new assessment methods that are less easy to violate the rules about collaboration and looking to outside sources, for instance. So I would not say we have perfect solutions yet. I would say it's very high on the agenda. We know that proctored online exams are not the perfect solution. For one thing, there's lots of problems with that software, but also it doesn't necessarily ensure that we are catching instances of academic dishonesty. I know that part of the answer, however, is making sure that students are aware that we do have, there can be consequences, that we are identifying and finding instances and able to track that to students who then are having 0 marks awarded for assignments or having to have the consequences applied to them if there's repeated behavior. So, no one is turning a blind eye to this. It takes a lot of resources, actually, a lot of people's time to monitor and then follow up when there are instances that where students are submitting the same identical work, for instance, on an essay question, but that work is being done because we know how important it is to maintain academic integrity.
I do want to take this opportunity to highlight for any students that might be on the line right now, because I think sometimes students may not be fully aware of what outside agencies or individuals are trying to do, and simply reach out looking for, what is advertised as tutorial support, for example. We've had a couple of incidences where students have now received threatening email responses, ransom email responses, actually, saying that if you don't pay this amount of money, I will be letting your instructor know that you received this help from us. And we've had a couple of those students come forward to their instructors which is how it came to our attention. So I think, unfortunately, our students also just have to be very vigilant on understanding what is a legitimate support, and you know, how you can get kind of pulled into having someone actually do work for you and then get into these very difficult situations. So just a heads up for our students as well to be careful.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from a faculty member. Many lecture theaters and classrooms at both Keele and Glendon campuses are in a very poor state of repair as a result of delayed maintenance over decades. One of the justifications used for this state of affairs is that the spaces that are most in need of attention are also the most heavily used, and there is never the opportunity to carry out the necessary maintenance and updating. Currently, the vast majority of teaching spaces at York stand empty. Is the administration grasping this unique opportunity to resolve the delayed maintenance problem in classroom spaces?
I'll let Carol take that question.
Because it's a very good news thing, and very happily, yes, it's exactly what we're doing. As you say, a number of the particularly larger lecture halls have been, we've had difficulty with the scheduling as to when they might be able to be updated. And this is exactly the opportunity we have now to do that. So indeed, the president approved that our multi-year, we had a 5-year plan for classroom renewal that had been funded through the board approval. And we had recommended, and the president accepted, that we shorten that timeline. So I believe that we're in phase 1 of classroom renewal right now. Phase 2 will start later this month. And our largest lecture halls, which have been the most problematic, will be updated by the time we, more classes are available, perhaps in the winter, but certainly by the time we get back to campus. If it's after the end of the calendar year, there will be a number of classrooms done. So we're really trying to shorten that 5-year program to about 2 years. If not faster than that. So it's a terrific news story, and I really am very appreciative to the folks in facility services who presented a plan that would allow us to shorten this timeline and deliver a lot of very well updated classrooms when we are all able to be back on campus.
All right, great. And so a question again from an anonymous submitter. I know that there are students who have accommodations due to learning disabilities, such as extra time on exams, tests, etc. How will these sorts of accommodations be handled with remote and online learning?
Go ahead, Lucy.
And I just answered that actually online. So Student Accessibility Services is fully functioning in a remote environment. And we, of course, encourage students to connect with the accessibility services to make all the arrangements in the same way as if they were on campus in person. Student Accessibility Services will provide the letters for the students to provide to their faculty members, and where necessary, work with the student and the faculty member to facilitate the most appropriate accommodation. With some of the technology, particularly during tests or exams, sometimes it can actually be easier for the accommodation, because with some technology, the faculty member can set the additional time in advance, and the student does not have to write in a special area away from their class at a different time. But Student Accessibility Services will explain all of that and support all students who register with them. Before the next question comes in, I just have this need because it came up a couple of times early, and it was a great question. Some staff asked, when I referred to some of the communications to students, could we copy them? So instead, what I will share is at the site that we have been talking about, which is, and I just lost it, Better Together. There is a tab for students. Every communication we send out to students is posted there. So if staff or faculty would like to know what communications are going out to students, they have the same access to it that any student does.
Okay, great. Very, very topical and important question submitted. Is there any effort to learn about workplace racism and to develop strategies to create and maintain a workplace in which all workers are treated equally and fairly, regardless of race? And we can probably zoom that out to all members of the org community, students and faculty as well. And perhaps the panel can discuss some of the work and discussions that have been going on around that.
Let me start a little bit. Unfortunately, our Vice President of Equity, People and Culture was not able to make this town hall, but I've been working quite closely with her. Obviously, our recent events have really shone attention on understanding within the broader umbrella of equity, diversity, and inclusion, the importance to look beyond that and to look at specific challenges, especially I would say in that category of visible minority, how different groups of people within that broad category are impacted. And although I want to acknowledge, the work that's been done by many of our community members, especially our Black students, faculty, and staff, historically, on addressing issues of anti-Black racism through their teaching and their research, it is very clear that much more needs to be done. And the university has made a commitment to ensure that we're allies both by what we're saying, but also by the actions that we have to undertake. So Sheila and I have been meeting with many different groups across the campus over the last month. And 2 updates have already come out, but there are some very strong themes that have emerged from the consultations that we've been undertaking about hiring more targeted hires, more Black faculty or BIPOC faculty, because of course representation across the university matters. And if we do this well, we can not only increase our representation, but we can also strengthen particular areas that the university, and building on, past strengths of the university in critical race theory and other areas. We will be coming out with, there was an announcement, I think today that came out, if not today, tomorrow, regarding the appointment of Carl James into a special advisor role to work with the VP of Equity, People and Culture on the development of an equity, diversity, and inclusion framework for the university, similar to the framework that we had developed already in the case of the Indigenous framework. But there'll also be several important initiatives, additional initiatives that will be coming out that speak specifically to the issue of anti-Black racism and discrimination in terms of new faculty appointments, in terms of enhancing the pipeline. So how do we support Black students from K-12 to undergrad, to professional, to graduate, to faculty appointments, if that's their interested, chosen path of career. So that a new framework is in development as well, concerning anti-Black racism, hopefully to come out in September. But as I've indicated, there'll be a further specific update on some new initiatives where there was real consensus that emerged in the consultations that have been undertaking, and that should be coming out next week. And I'd like to open it up to my colleagues to add anything that they might want to add.
I might just start by adding that there are a lot of really productive conversations going on. And one of the things that we recognize is that as much as there needs to be sort of university level leadership and coordination of these efforts, there's also a lot of local community issues that people would like to bring forward in different parts of the university. Different faculties, different administrative divisions, different units have different things that they think are priorities to talk about or to make happen. And so one of the things we have done is actually create, we're just creating it as we speak. We're working on a central support fund so that a dean, for instance, can apply for some financial assistance for their faculty to engage in activities that they think the community is most is placing most importance on, such as, for instance, it might be that the community wants to have a facilitated conversation about what has been going on in the faculty, what the experiences of different members of the community are, some educational activities and some planning activities about how we're going to shift the culture. They might also feel that they need some additional personnel. They need somebody who has a role where they have got dedicated time to actually assist members of the community who are feeling distress, who are finding that they want to discuss things that they believe are wrong that are going on, and how to, how they can deal with that themselves and what can be done about that. There's also a review going underway of our hiring practices. That is part of what Professor James will be helping with. How is it that we make sure that we are as fair as possible and that we are doing as much as possible to support the career development and the full development of all of our employees? So there really is quite a bit of work underway, and it's going to be exciting to be able to communicate about it. Starting, I think, next week will be a first wave of updates coming, and then this will be a long-term process really of continuing to work at this and to look at our progress and to keep reporting back and keep listening as to what is needed. This is not going to be a short-term process. This is a long-term commitment that we all need to make.
Lucy?
So very much what the president and the provost has said. And the only thing I will add is in the division of students, we have been listening carefully. We just finished a full week of professional development with all of our staff. We've had lots of listening sessions with students, student leaders, student organizations. We're making the commitment that we understand to really action change, we all need to ensure that we're educated on racism, the impact of racism, and how to implement change. So across the division, from the executive and the leadership of the division and right across the division of students, we are undertaking a plan to educate ourselves so that we can do better for our students and for each other.
All right, thank you very much. So we're coming up on the end of the session. We can probably squeeze in one more question. And a few people have asked about enrollment coming up in fall and how that looks at the institution in terms of domestic and international students. And I wonder if the panel at a high level can comment on how the picture is evolving.
You know, we've had some positive news and we've had some challenging news. In some cases where enrollment has been better than expected, depending on the student group that we're talking about, in some cases challenging. I will say that with so much uncertainty, we had adopted a scenario model of what we thought was going to be likely in terms of the potential number of students who might choose not to come onto campus, perhaps wait a year, might not be able to get here if they were international students. And the scenario is going to be better based on more recent update than we expected. But at the same time, there is no doubt that we will have a significant impact on the university for 2021 with the potential situation of having to find somewhere in the vicinity of potentially another $75 million in lost revenue, and how we would cope with that for 2021, and the potential flow-through impact of having a smaller enrollment base for 2021. Even if there is strong recovery in 21-22, you have that smaller group over the next number of years as part of the flow-through. So that's our current understanding of our situation. And of course, that is on top of the decline in tuition that we experienced last year. So it is a challenging situation. I will say, though, that York University is in far better shape than many universities. We took many steps over the last number of years to ensure that we were in a place of strength Last year in 2019-20, we had a very strong enrollment year, and in fact, finished the year ahead of budget. And so some of that is going to help us mitigate the impact for 2021. So I would say in general, you know, as much as we have to focus on response right now, short-term response, and think about how we're going to make it through this next year, what contingency plan we might need to have to put in place, where we might have to delay, you know, some initiatives that we were hoping to move forward on for a year. At the same time, we very much have our eye on recovery. This university has been doing an incredibly amazing job over time of strengthening our programs, looking for the way in which higher education is evolving on our research activity, exciting new projects. Many of you may have heard that we're found the means by which to go ahead with the Markham campus. In the short term, obviously, you know, some might be asking, you know, how can the university manage all that? But Markham itself is part of our recovery. It's thinking about, you know, what do we need to do between now and 2 or 3 years when the country is fully recovered, when demands for enrollment in York Region are increasing, when working professionals are going to need to reskill and upgrade because of the impact of COVID-19, automation, AI on jobs. You know, York University needs to be the university in York Region, one of the fastest growing regions in the country. So we always have our eye on both short-term response and mitigation, but also on long-term recovery, so that we can be one of those universities that actually comes through this stronger than before. So maybe I'll just finish with those remarks.
All right, and as we are coming up on time, I think that's probably a good note to finish. I'll just say again, just a reminder to folks that there will be a survey question that will sort of pop up shortly. Please take the time to answer. I think it's a very short survey, but it does help us improve these sessions. And if you submitted a question and you didn't get an answer to it, we apologize, but we will be following up with you afterwards to make sure you do get an answer to your question. And with that, I will just turn it back to the president for any closing remarks.
Just really by way of closing, I just want to thank everyone again for all of your contributions. People have been working really in such creative ways. Our community made the Markham Center campus happen. Our community has managed this huge transition of all of our online teaching and our services at both of our Kiel and our Glendon campuses possible. I just really want to thank everyone and remind you all again about the well-being strategies that we've put in place to help you balance your home and your work life. Just take care, and I hope we have an opportunity to connect soon. On behalf of the panel, thank you all.